Hello everyone, Jonathan here, and for this video I wanted to take another look at Axis and Allies Classic and specifically examine what a player who is controlling the United Kingdom might do. But before I get into that, I just have some really exciting news. I just became aware maybe about 5 minutes ago. I was checking Amazon and I saw that my novel, Cosmic Fate, down here in the corner, is currently within the top 5% of science fiction books in terms of sales and the top 1% of all books overall. So it's really exciting, and I just wanted to take a moment to share that with you. I really appreciate any support. If any of you have bought books, if not, if science fiction isn't your thing, that's totally fine. But to those of you who did choose to show some support, I really appreciate it. And if you are just now becoming aware of Cosmic Fate and you do enjoy science fiction, I encourage you to pick up a copy on Amazon. Or if you plan to be at the Origins Game Fair in June out in Columbus, Ohio, that is a few states away from me, but I do plan on attending. Of course, I could bring some copies out there as well, if you would like to get something signed. Now, with that said, let's move on to the United Kingdom. You go third in turn order. Soviet Union goes before you, one of your allies, and then Germany also goes before you. And Germany is likely to run rampant and really have a big influence on how the board looks on your first turn. More than likely, they're going to take out at least some of your navy. If not, they'll attempt to try and take out all of it. And they might take out all of it up here in the North Atlantic. So you'll either have, you probably won't have all your ships. This is the starting setup that I have here. But you may have a few of them, or you may not have any ships there. And then your sub in the Mediterranean. You do get to go before Japan. So at least you know your transport over here by India is going to be safe. And in this version of Axis and Allies, you have no navy down by Australia. I know that changed in Revised and in some, I think pretty much every version since. Every version after Classic, you have some navy down there, but not in this case. Also remember that transports can fire back. They defended a 1, and they can be taken as casualties, so that helps us. And as I was thinking about how I would play as the United Kingdom, I'm not sure how much, now that I've gotten used to transports not being able to fire back, how much that has influenced my approach. But in any case, let's go ahead and get started. So Germany is probably going to move on Africa with something. You do have this fighter over here in India. It's kind of hard to see. Let me zoom in on it a little bit. That fighter in India, on turn 1, you cannot reach any transports, like in Revised, and again, a lot of other versions. There's a Japanese transport here that you can hit, but that is not the case in this game. And also in those other versions, I believe the fighter, well, sometimes there's a carrier here and there's a fighter on it. But in any case, you can't hit any Japanese transports. If you do choose to keep your fighter over here in this area, every turn you are going to be wanting to look for a lone transport or maybe a lone submarine. In this version of Axis and Allies, subs can submerge, but it is after combat. So if you find a lone sub, you would get 1 round of trying to hit it before it could run away. So there's a chance you could pick off a lone ship like that. You could choose to move this fighter, up here for better defense. Japan probably is going to take China on its first turn. That is going to be really hard to hold. But if you're coordinating with the Soviet Union, maybe they'll go all out into Manchuria and take that out. Then it might be appropriate for you to put a fighter here. Maybe the U.S. puts a factory in Xinjiang or something like that. But assuming that the Soviets don't do an all-out assault on Manchuria, and Japan has all of their forces, and they still have both their transports, probably not the best move putting that fighter into China, because Japan is going to be able to take it if they really want it. Now, something else you could do, depending on what happens in Africa over here, if you want to try and counterattack Germany, you do have one infantry here. You could pick up an infantry. I mean, you could pick up two technically, but then India is defenseless, so you might not want to do that. You could either move one infantry in there and send your fighter into Egypt to try and counterattack, or you could pick up one or two infantry from the transport and drop them off. Like I said, I wouldn't recommend dropping off two of them. One is a little bit of a stretch. Hopefully, with whatever Germany has, maybe you can hit them with an infantry and a fighter. But if Germany dropped off troops with its transport, that might not be the case. And so then you really want to think, is it going to help to counterattack there, or do you just want to try and slow the Germans down, causing them to maybe some forces down here and some forces over here, and if you block them with one infantry every step of the way, that'll slow them down until the US or England, comes in the other side. So those are just a couple things to think about there. Now, when it comes to this C zone up here, in this version of Axis and Allies, unlike a lot of others, I do not believe that if you place a carrier, so let's say you purchased a carrier on your first turn, that you could move your two fighters over and land on it. I don't believe you can do that in this version of the game, so we're going to have to be a little bit more creative. I think we'll still be okay. But ultimately, depending on what Germany has arrayed against you, what kind of ships it has left, what kind of air force it has within striking distance, which actually, now that I look at the board, almost every German territory is within striking distance with fighters, except for Southern Europe. Or no, I'm sorry, even Southern Europe is within range, assuming that Germany controls all these territories. Ukraine, 1, 2, 3 lands in Western Europe or in Finland, Norway. So any fighter in mainland Europe over here can hit your ships over there. And if they have a bomber, let's say down here, if they sent the bomber in here, like I mentioned, potentially doing in the German strategy video, it's now going to land in Libya, and it can also reach up there. So scratch what I said about watching out for German fighters. Pretty much if they have a fighter in mainland Europe or a bomber in North Africa, it can hit you. So what I would recommend doing is, assuming that that is in fact what the board looks like and something didn't go terribly, terribly wrong on Germany's turn and they started losing fighters, they may lose a couple, but I mean like a lot of fighters. What I actually would recommend doing for my purchase is to save my money, because you're going to drop down a huge navy second turn. Now, this doesn't mean that we're going to rest on our laurels. In fact, what we're going to want to do, let's see, it'll be, so on the US's turn, they also can't build a carrier and put fighters on it that turn. So they can build a carrier over here on their turn 1. On turn 2, we can fly, our turn 2, we can fly our fighters over, and then we've got a fully loaded carrier that can move somewhere, along with whatever else the US builds. We could also, if we wanted to, on our first turn, we could, since we know we're going to be losing those two fighters, we could build 2 more fighters on our, let me do the math on that really quick. Okay, so US is turn 1, they've got our fighters, or no, we moved our fighters on turn 1. On turn 2, we could build a carrier of our own, and they could fly some of their fighters over. So it is going to look a little bit weird. Sorry, I had to work that out in my head. But ultimately, we could very quickly end up with 2 fully loaded carriers, along with some other surface ships floating around, you know, this triangle over here, which can threaten all sorts of German territories. One interesting thing of note in this game is that the United States, the East Coast over here, actually can, 1, 2, hit Western Europe. So you could run into a situation of Western Europe is not defended all that well, where the U.S. could not so much do a Normandy as just sail across the Atlantic and invade Western Europe, which is going to be especially effective if England is able to attack and either take it or heavily damage it, and then the U.S. just comes in, because both of those countries will go before Germany's next turn. So as per the usual, England is going to want to coordinate heavily with the U.S. It's unfortunate that they can't build a carrier and put their own fighters on it. It is going to delay a turn or so, but with some nice coordination with the U.S., it is going to be possible to, by the end of turn 2, so after the U.S.'s turn 2, to have 2 fully loaded carriers running around. In fact, if the U.S. wanted to, so it's going to go turn 1, build the carrier, England flies the fighters over. On England's turn 2, the U.S. could move the carrier up here. Now, you do have to be sure that Germany doesn't have enough to counter and take it. England may want to have a couple transports in the water on its turn 2, if possible, just to soak up a few hits. And then after that, you end up with, even more surface fleet, protection, those 2 carriers that I mentioned before. So a lot of potential here. You really need to monitor what's going on in Germany closely. You need to decide what you want to do with this transport and that fighter in India. But on the other hand, you do have some options. It isn't like you're locked into a certain move, like, Russia has to reinforce Karelia, can't afford to lose it. Germany wants to take Karelia at all costs. You actually have some options, United Kingdom. You do need to coordinate, like I said, but that's pretty normal for the United Kingdom in any version of Axis and Allies that I've played. Certainly any of the Global War board games. So hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry I'm still a little bit frazzled about the book thing, but it's a good excitement. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will have Japan up before too long.